met this fellow, he's an attorney, and we started talking about an issue. And this issue to me is very important, and I'm really curious about it. So he's going to let us all know. Make welcome the first time, Todd Seister to the Rob Dennis Show. Hey, how's it going, Todd? How are you? Pretty good. So we're sitting there talking, and I said, what is your expertise? He said he's a retired attorney. I said, you know, nobody watches more TV than me. I mean, when you got 10 televisions in your house, 3 in the living room with NBC, CBS, and ABC on, I don't miss nothing, you know what I mean? Because I got to stay informed, you know, for all this stuff. And I said, it seems to me there's been a couple of cases where a guy was released from prison because they finally proved that he was innocent. And I mentioned to Todd, I said, you know, every time I see one of these stories that DNA proved he was innocent, I never hear the prosecuting attorney say, I'm sorry, or it was a mistake. He still says, well, I think he's guilty, and blah, blah, blah. And I said to Todd, is it changing? And I said, you need to come on the show, and I'd like to talk about this. It is not changing, you say, or it is changing?
I don't think it's any worse than it's ever been. Mm-hmm. I think if somebody denies reality, like a prosecutor, and this applies to other people too, not just prosecutors. Mm-hmm. People that can't admit a mistake, or, I mean, if you ignore the facts still exist. Right. And there could be to me, there'd be another reason behind it. I don't know if it's insecurity, inability to admit a mistake, probably an endless list.
But are they reelected?
Please?
Prosecutor, are they reelected?
They're elected in Ohio, they are, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
So it's not changing then, and you've been very frustrated, you said yourself, about these prosecutors, how they just keep swearing up and down that he was guilty, and the DNA said he wasn't, you know?
Well, you see it on TV. I mean, they have the one lawyers that had the project, the Innocence Project, I think it was called, mm-hmm. that they go out and take a case that they thought was worthwhile and have a DNA test run. And perhaps DNA wasn't available at that time. A lot of times it applies to older crimes mm-hmm. before DNA was available.
Sure.
And if the evidence was kept, then you could still do a DNA test. And then they prove they're innocent. And again, not all prosecutors are you know, bullheaded when they want to admit a mistake. But if it was me, I mean, if you do the best you can when you prosecute with the evidence you have.
Sure.
Now, had they known at the time there was DNA evidence that absolved them from any guilt and still prosecuted, that'd be something different.
Now, have you ever heard, and I've heard this several times when you're watching these stories on the network, that, God, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? Oh, God, I'm losing my mind. I have some-timers, Todd. Did you know that?
I have the same thing.
Sometimes I remember,
yes,
sometimes
yes,
I don't. We talked about the DNA, but there was something else I was going to talk about that changes the prosecutor's opinion. Now, I can't remember what it was. I guess I'm getting some-timers worse than I thought. There was a case recently where a guy was supposed to go to jail, and they never called him.
I heard that, yes.
And so someone had to determine whether he was going to serve the 13 years or he was rehabilitated. You remember that case that's been on the news recently?
I do. I read about it.
And what did you think of the judge's decision?
That I didn't hear. I don't know what his decision was.
Well, the decision was, you know, when you go, I mean, look at Shawshank. Do you feel that you've been rehabilitated? That's my favorite part of the show, that little thing, speech he gives. He said, well, I don't know, let me see. I was 17-year-old when I came here, and sometimes I'd like to go back to being 17. I want to talk to him, remember? And I wonder if the judge thought about this, but his opinion was that this guy was rehabilitated. He had changed his life around. He was married, had 2 kids, had a great job, great in the community, did community work, volunteer. He said he will no longer, it's over. He will not be going back to jail. That was the final answer. And I thought that was a pretty good answer.
It was good he had the option to do that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't required or mandated to send the poor guy to prison after all that time.
I think that was a fair decision. I mean, because he had changed his life. because like in Shawshank, he wasn't the same guy he was 13, 14 years ago. And a lot of time in prison, you get worse than get better, rehabilitated, don't you agree?
Well, I can't think of anything worse than being sent to prison for something you didn't do.
Oh yeah, that would be horrible.
Like if the DNA convicted somebody and they, for rape, usually a rape case or a assault or murder, that type of thing where DNA shows up, the blood of the defendant or the semen or whatever. But I can't think of anything worse than to be convicted of a crime you didn't commit.
No, that would be just unbearable. It'd be bad enough to go in when you did do the crime, and then when you didn't,
Yes.
that would be pretty bad. Well, I hope things get better because we're seeing a lot more stories. I think in the past year, I've seen 7 stories where guys have been released, and 2 women. And thank God the death penalty wasn't involved in any of these cases, because they have also said they've proven cases later, after the person was put to death, that they were innocent. And I certainly wouldn't want that on my conscience. I'm sure nobody would.
No, there's been a few of those, and it's too late then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.